Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's Astin Community Engaged Scholars presentation on Reconceptualizing Knowledge.
Today we will be elaborating on what our fall, winter, and spring quarter consisted of, how as Aston scholars we were able to reconceptualize knowledge, and lastly provide reflections of our experiences and takeaways of this program.
Hello, my name is Fernanda Soto. I'm from Wilmington, California. My pronouns are she, hers, ella. I'm a graduating senior majoring in sociology and double minoring in labor studies and public affairs. My interest in Aston Scholars sparked due to my previous experience assisting professors by conducting interviews with recently arrived migrants. What I found in these interviews was a common theme of this gross mismanagement and humanitarian violation at the hands of ICE of this huge prison industrial system. I knew I wanted to be a part of the people's movement in dismantling this predatory system, and Aston Scholars has allowed me to direct the love and passion I have for my community into research.
Hello everyone, my name is Guadalupe Martinez. My pronouns are she, her, hers. My major is physiological science and my minor is global health. I was born and raised in Koreatown, Los Angeles, and being the proud daughter of immigrants, I am interested in using my education as a tool to empower immigrant communities as well as other marginalized and vulnerable communities. And as an Aston scholar, I want to gain more knowledge in the current situation that is taking place at the border, as well as develop skills that I will be able to use as a future researcher and physician.
Hi, my name is Kayla Kelly Brew. Pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a fourth year political science major with an education minor, and I became interested in joining Aston Scholars after I read about how the goal of the course would be to create migrant-centered solutions and to work um, really like in depth with like actual like service providers, um, because I'm always looking for new ways of research that put people first and that like highlight like narratives and like counter narratives, and so that's what sparked my interest to apply for and join Aston Scholars.
Hello, my name is Sebastian. My pronouns are he, him, it. I'm a third year political science and labor studies major, and I was interested in joining Aston because I wanted to be a part of creating long-term solutions that center migrants themselves as opposed to short-term solutions that don't. I also wanted to learn more about Title 42 and the Trump administration's impact on the migrant community, and then also their mishandling of the migrant crisis at the border. This topic hits close to home for me as I was raised in an immigrant family in San Diego, 20 minutes away from the border. So the topic really hit close to home for me.
Hello, everyone. My name is Iwala. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a fourth year sociology major. I joined Aston's because before Aston's, I was doing a lot of quantitative research that centered around numbers and statistics. And I wanted to learn how to center narratives of migrants and the community rather than statistics and just like facts that really have nothing to do with the community itself and have no input from the community. I also wanted to learn more about the migrant crisis and how to build interracial solidarity and organize among migrants.
Alrighty, so this is a breakdown of what our course looked like for fall quarter. So number one, we engaged in collective analysis of foundational readings, investigating issues facing trans-border migrants and cross-border solidarity efforts to issues. The key themes we explored in our readings were labor exploitation, health and humanitarian needs, social and legal discrimination across migrant journeys. We also learned about anti-oppressive research methods. We developed a greater understanding of the number one, responsibilities when conducting research in historically disenfranchised communities, and number two, research methods to elevate the voices, agency, and autonomy of vulnerable migrant communities. We also did a collaborative literature review that focused on an issue related to challenges faced by migrants. We identified a central research question and provided an analysis of a topic based on contemporary literature. So for the winter quarter, what was so distinct about this year was our virtual partnership. This class was guided by the expertise and lessons from Black and Afro-diasporic, Indigenous, and TGNC community-based organizers, leaders, multi-level experts, and grassroots activists demanding for immigrant and workers' rights in the US-Mexico border city of Tijuana. And number two, we focused on our preliminary project proposal. In this proposal, we narrated and thoroughly described the three teams' proposed project and research activities for the spring quarter. The three teams were the legal defense team, movement sustainability team, and the narrative team.
In the spring, we continued our efforts to create these projects with our respective teams, culminating in 3 final projects. For the movement sustainability team, we developed a welcome packet for recent arrivals in the US to act as a resource guide for both service providers and recent arrivals. Some of the things we did to create this welcome packet was we hosted informal conversation sessions with service providers focusing on the needs of recent arrivals.
We also conducted interviews with recent arrivals currently living in the US in both English and Spanish, and we analyzed existing research on recent arrival experience.
So for the legal defense team, we focused on developing a series of Know Your Rights videos. And these Know Your Rights videos were centered around rights that are often violated against migrant communities. And so some of them included asylum, labor rights, and language rights.
These videos also emphasize the importance of fostering solidarity and community care among migrants. I was able to participate in the language accessibility component of this project. Therefore, we were able to establish a collaboration with Cielo and Jami linguists to make these videos accessible in at least the Spanish and Haitian Creole languages. And our goal is to use these videos as a framework and be able to translate these series into other indigenous languages such as Zapoteco.
And then for the narrative team, we mostly focused on how the narrative or state narratives kind of remove the humanity from migrants. And so we wanted to center the stories of Black, Indigenous, and LGBTQ plus migrants. And we mostly asked ourselves, how can we return a sense of humanity back to the migrants? And so we developed a zine, which is a short magazine which consisted of resources, history, and migrant art. And so we mostly wanted to showcase how migrants aren't just migrants, they are human beings as well, and they have a variety of talents, including art, poetry, music. And so we wanted to showcase that in our narrative. And so I focused myself on outreaching to food and healthcare resources in San Diego and Tijuana, alongside Debbie, who was a community organizer.
An overarching theme that we encountered in the last 3 quarters was this theme of reconceptualizing knowledge. So thinking about new ways that we as community scholars and researchers find and use knowledge besides typical methods of data collection and analysis. Subcategories of this theme include our experience with distance learning, community knowledge / different forms of activism, and the use of the power analysis grid. Starting with distance learning, navigating research in an online setting exposed the benefits and difficulties of cross-cultural research in this time of distance learning. So a benefit that we encountered was actually through the Zoom Translate feature, which eased communication between classmates. So interpretation, which was given by Jami Linguistics, allowed for cross-cultural communication between a wide variety of language speakers, English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole, which would have not been accessible if we were in person. Zoom also allowed for community scholars living across the world to collaborate within the class space during class time. So it was a lot easier. It's a lot easier to plan to be in a Zoom call than it is to plan to be in a classroom when everyone is kind of living everywhere. Some of the difficulties that we encountered with distance learning was a lack of in-person collaboration, um, which restrained interaction between individuals of different teams. So we spent the most amount of time in breakout rooms with our own teams, but in-person class would have allowed more time for cross-team collaboration um, and conversation. And another difficulty that is bound to arise in any online space is technical difficulties, um, which I think is just like a difficulty of any of yeah of like any space that has distance learning.
Yeah, and another component of reconceptualizing knowledge was community knowledge and different forms of activism. So we learned more about the importance of community knowledge in our project. Community knowledge was essential in elevating the voices of migrants, as opposed to a savior and self-righteous mindset that does away with migrant voices.
With such difficult topics that we were able to talk about throughout the quarter, we also realized that it was really important to honor and consider the experiences of community activists that were a part of our class, rather than relying on literature reviews, media, or states, just because, as we know from experience, the media doesn't necessarily portray the entire truth 100% of the time. Oftentimes, some of the things that are portrayed in whether it's social media or television tend to portray migrants in a certain light, whether it can be for a positive or a negative way. And so we really took advantage of the fact that we had people who were in the ground working with migrants directly and were able to learn from their experiences, as well as this class provided us with a space for community members and leaders to not only share important and relevant information that was happening locally and in present time, but also to share resources such as where someone can access COVID-19 vaccinations, or where they can access resources to free food and other resources like that.
Yeah. However, there were some personal drawbacks, as most of us felt like an outsider, since community experts in the class worked directly with migrants. And so we felt removed from the community as we were students working remotely. However, community knowledge was such a fundamental part in self-awareness, and it caused us to want to work and learn more about the community.
So the next theme under reconceptualizing knowledge is the power analysis grid. And so the power analysis grid allowed us to visually conceptualize the political and power landscape to understand who holds power. And it also helped us map out and understand broader motivations and decision makers, our opposition and our allies. And so the power analysis grid on it is like different organizations. And on the horizontal axis is what extent they are for our social justice agenda or against our social justice agenda. And then on the vertical axis is how much power they hold. And so someone with a lot of power may be the president, which is like at 10, and someone with a little bit of power may be like a community organization, which might be at 3 or 4. And then I think the most important part of this power analysis is conceptualizing our project on the power analysis and how much power we have and how for the social justice cause was our project.
To conclude today's presentation, we wanted to share our sabiduría, our final reflections with you all. What I personally learned was that we must set pragmatic goals while still allowing ourselves to immerse fully in collective imagining. I mention realistic goals because so long as the movement of people is racialized via imperialist powers, no matter who is in office, the need to do this work will always exist. So realistically, our project was a continual process of figuring out how do we get to where we want to get while understanding the realities of each day. We were experiencing a pandemic and a presidential election and a whole new administration while conducting this research, which really stressed the need to be pragmatic about our individual capacity within the group, while still maintaining that balance where we allow ourselves to dream and to have big aspirations.
So this program was really a key part of my academic journey here at UCLA. It was really a culmination of all the work that I've been doing throughout the years. And this pandemic being especially difficult for my family and I really am grateful that I was able to be a part of the project, as well as I was able to learn a lot of the importance of community engagement, as well as not only connecting with my family's roots and my roots, but also learn about the importance of preservation of Indigenous language and culture, especially because during these times we see that a lot of these communities are being greatly neglected. And something that I really, really will take away from this is also the vitalness of language accessibility and being able to truly understand what you are being told in a language that you feel comfortable in, not just confirming to the fact that just because you look Hispanic, you speak Spanish. That isn't always the case. And so, something that I'm going to take away from this is really being able to vouch for those who feel vulnerable and may not be able to communicate with us in a language that we're used to, such as English or Spanish, but really being able to advocate for them and making sure that they know that language accessibility is a human right.
Something that I took away from, this last year as an Astin scholar is the need for support and resource allocation, um, and specifically for recent arrivals, right? So this idea that like basic needs are a right that everyone is entitled to, um, regardless of documentation status, and um, we I feel like I have to do everything in my power to help make sure that that's something that everyone has access to, as well as socio-emotional support during this time. Reading a lot of the interviews with some of our recent arrivals really made me think about like both the need for like material basic needs, but also the need for like just like being there to like support others and like putting people first. Another reflection that I had and something that I kind of like learned was the power dynamic that exists within organizing spaces. So kind of what Uala was explaining in the last slide. I think I've always been aware of power dynamics, but being in this class like really helped me understand kind of like how that works within like organizing spaces, and like where our work and my work and my future work and all of these other things like where we all kind of play a role.
Yeah, and then I personally learned the power of like nonviolence in the form of art that can change stigmas and stereotypes and pave the way forward for change. And then although I will never understand the struggles of a Haitian migrant or a trans migrant firsthand, class materials like this bridge called my back really made me analyze my own identities and really inspect them and be more self-aware of them, and also be more aware of like the importance of intersectionality for solidarity, and in this class cross-border solidarity. But I'm very grateful for this opportunity.
Uh, what I learned from Aston's was the importance of community care and self-care. And so this movement, in order for it to sustain itself, we all need to take care of ourselves and communities at hand, because we know that these systems of oppression have been around for centuries and it's going to take a very long time to dismantle them. And so if the community cannot sustain itself, then there will be no movement, essentially. And I also think an essential part of community care is interracial and cross-gender and just solidarity in general across different intersections of systems of oppression, because we know that systems of oppression are intersected and entangled within each other, and you can't dismantle one system of oppression without dismantling all of them. And so our liberation is connected, and so our communities should be connected as well. We want to thank you all for listening to our presentation, and we want to thank the instructors as well for providing us with an amazing year. We've all learned so much, and we'll take a lot of this with us in our future organizing and community engagement.